So, Payments.com did a survey of merchants, which they do a lot of course. They
Right.
found 82% plan to increase their use of digital wallets. It seems that consumer expectations for frictionless payments are pushing businesses to mirror that behavior in their B2B
Yeah,
activities.
for sure.
So, a study undertaken by Payments documents how checks, which are currently the dominant payment method, can be a real drain on merchant cash flow, which of
Hmm.
course is no big surprise. But it can really tip the balance between survival and insolvency. Small businesses surveyed endure average payment delays of 9.1 days and total payment wait times of nearly 29 days.
Hmm.
That's a
Oh, a
lot for
long
a small
time.
business.
It
Yeah.
is.
And of course the challenge of course is that the wallets need to integrate with it, ERP systems.
Right.
And
Sure.
that's going to take some work, I think.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that all kind of comes together. And it's also tough too, right? Because of the verticalization of it. It's like, you know,
Right.
a lot of times these surveys that they do, they sound very clear, but then when you actually go like, okay, how do we implement this? What is the action step that we take? It's not
Right.
easy because you're like, well, wait a minute. Well, for which vertical? Some businesses are using ERP, some are
Right.
using point of sale, some are using, so there's a variety of
Right.
solutions and services out there. And you're like, okay, what do I do with this information? It's not always cut and dry.
Yeah, yeah, and like you say, it all depends on the vertical, and you know, some of these are really sort of a slam dunk, but some of them, can be very complex.
Yeah.
And when you're doing these types of surveys, they're not really making a distinction between the various verticals,
Right.
right?
Right. Exactly.
So next up, merchants are amping up their tirade over card processing costs.
Hmm.
They just sent out a press release highlighting a study from payments consulting firm CMSPI, which shows that fees collected for processing credit and debit card payments totaled $236.4 billion in 2024, which is up from 222.3 billion in 2023.
Hmm.
The average rate for a Visa MasterCard transaction was 2.91%.
Meaning that, just to clarify, that's the average rate that a merchant paid for the transaction.
Right,
Right.
right,
So that would
right.
include, interchange, card brand fees, markup from the processor, or flat rate pricing with
Exactly.
Square, whatever. Right.
Right, everything, exactly. So, the Merchant Payments Coalition, of course, is the industry impetus behind the Credit Card Competition Act,
Right.
which was authored by Senator Dick Durbin, and it passed as pro. We've talked about that before. It's basically issuers with 100 billion in assets and up would have to enable those cards to be processed over at least two unaffiliated networks. Um, in other words, like a Visa or MasterCard, as well as like a NICE or a Star or a Shazam. Um, and if passed as prologue, well, Senator Durbin may well try to attach the bill as an amendment to must pass legislation. That's how he got the so-called Durbin Amendment that, capped debit card interchange.
Right.
That was tacked on to the Dodd-Frank Act, which was the financial crisis, the legislation that came in the wake of the
Right.
financial crisis of 2008. So, who knows what he might try to attach it to? He's already tried that a couple times.
I know.
So, you
Yeah.
know, we, that's something I'm really keeping my eye on because
Yeah.
it's,
Please continue to keep us posted on that one. He's very
yeah,
much a, if at first you don't succeed, try again.
yeah,
So,
exactly, right? Yeah, exactly. But here's an interesting thing that sort of kind of the dovetails with that.
yeah.
As surcharging is becoming more commonplace, consumers are starting to feel nickel and dimed. Um, and it's the merchants that they're irked at.
Right. Right.
A JD Power survey of credit card holders published in August revealed that 65% had been charged higher prices when using their credit cards. I should note here the survey doesn't, as it was reported, doesn't seem to make a distinction between surcharging and cash discounting.
Right.
That distinction may be lost on consumers.
Right.
But the customer satisfaction score for card issuers fell when consumers encountered surcharging. And 81% said they used an alternative payment method. Now, Wallet Hub did a survey of, and that's where they found that consumers are really that's the survey that shows that consumers are irked at merchants, not at card issuers.
Mm-hmm.
82% of those surveyed had been charged a fee for paying with a credit card. 87% said they felt nickeled and dimed.
Mm-hmm.
3 out of 5 people said they felt it was unfair for merchants to pass along their card processing fees to customers. That suggests to me that the merchant campaign against what they call swipe fees isn't really resonating with consumers the way they thought it would.
Right. Right.
So they just keep sending out press releases and hoping that the local
Right.
media will pick it up, and I have to admit this
Yeah.
that one study did get picked up. The study that I mentioned in the last item about CMSPI
Right. Right.
got picked up by um, a lot of local media outlets,
Right. Right.
and that's where they're hoping to get the momentum. But
Traction. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, so a couple things I would say about this, Patty. One thing I find so fascinating about all this data is that this the important thing to me about this data is what it doesn't tell us. In other words, these reports tend to lump together, as you mentioned, cash discounting, dual pricing, surcharging, as if they're all the same. However, in my experience so far with dealing with all these ISOs and all this, is that when dual pricing or cash discounting, either one, when they are done correctly,
right,
customers don't feel that same burn. And
right,
so when it's like, okay, well, 81% of the people say they have been surcharged, it's like, well, yeah, 81% of consumers have been to a business in the last 6 months where they have had either a non-compliant or a compliant surcharge,
right,
right? And in either case, hasn't gone well, because they are like, oh, there's this extra line item here. This is not good. And I think what Visa has to be very careful about is that Visa has, you know, I used this example a long time ago on the podcast, Patty, about I was reading the story and they were talking about how governments will make decisions that have unintended consequences. Remember, I was talking
sure,
about
right.
how they at one point they were trying to figure out how to tax people because they didn't have like this is like 1,000 years ago. They didn't have
Right.
like income tax
Or
reports.
100 years ago, but it feels like a
Yeah,
thousand.
yeah, yeah. But I think this was in Old England, so this probably
Okay, well,
was a while
okay,
ago,
so, yeah, so
four or
yeah,
500 years ago or something. Well,
right.
anyway, what happened was they realized that rich people had big houses with lots of windows. So they said, we're going to
I
tax
remember
people
this. Yes, I
based on
read
the
this.
number of windows in their house.
Right, right,
Seems like a very obvious, like, well, sure, we can just do that, right? Well, over the next 20 years, every house that was built with no windows. And as a result of that, like 1 million people died of infectious diseases and
of
everything because there
course.
was no fresh air and there wasn't air conditioning or anything. There was no fresh
Right,
air in the houses, and it was this big issue health wise. But without realizing it, they moved everybody towards windowless houses. And I think one thing that Visa has to be very careful about is they've come and said, "Hey, all this non-compliant, dual pricing, da 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 da. We hate all this separate line item and all that. That's a surcharge." And clearly they've done all of this with the intention of saying we hate all these programs. Like, we get it. Like, Visa doesn't want us to charge more when people use their card because for obvious reasons you're discouraging people from using the Visa network. So I
right,
understand that. But there's an unintended consequence, and that is Visa is making it such that the only kind of viable option is this, compliant surcharge. Well, for the compliant surcharge, Visa wants us to make sure that we smash it in the customer's face every chance we get. Sign on the
right,
door, sign at the counter, separate line item, little sign by the register. It's like, okay, you want all this disclosure. Well, guess what? Consumers weren't really noticing it very much a couple years
right,
ago.
right.
Now it's everywhere. They notice it on everything
It's like in
because
their faces,
it's
right?
we're trying to. And so again, I understand, I get it, but we got to be careful about unintended consequences here, where we're pushing everybody to this, compliant surcharge type program where, yeah, we're really, making sure the disclosure is super obvious. Now, again, in my
Mm-hmm.
experience, where I've seen dual pricing done right, or I've seen cash discounting done right, you know, I haven't seen that same kind of customer reaction. The other
Yeah,
thing
I
I'll
think
say
you're right.
too, the other information that's not included in these studies is, and well, I think there was wasn't there one stat you said about how a certain number of people said that they did use an alternate payment method or
Right,
something? Can't
right.
remember what that stat
Yeah.
was.
Four
Maybe
out of five.
4 out of 5. And it's like they said that they use an alternate form of payment, right? I think that number is totally bogus.
Yeah,
I think that's
I
very
do too.
similar to the survey of how many people watch PBS. And if you do a survey, you're going to get like 75% of people say they regularly watch PBS. What we know is that they don't. Hardly anybody does. They say that because they want to seem like the kind of person that watches PBS when they're asked
Right.
the question. I think in that same way here, we have the problem of consumers are like, well, of course I didn't stand for this, them nickel and diming me. So I used cash. Really? 4 out of 5 used, they didn't even have any cash on them. Like nobody does. So to me, I think there's very important information that's left out of this, which is number one, what type of differential pricing was it? Right. So I feel like there's almost, and again, it's very difficult to get this information because you'd have to know what the merchant is doing. And all. So, big picture there to me is we got to be very careful as we push people to this like super disclosure stuff
Right.
because we're going to
Right.
damage the overall networks way more than if we were doing other programs that are less in your face but still transparent. And again, that's why I'm a big fan of compliant dual pricing and things like that where we don't have those issues. And the other one is, yes, consumers don't like it. Obviously, it's like what do you expect? It's like let me call a consumer and say, "Did you realize you were charged more? Oh, you
Right.
did? Did you enjoy it?"
Yeah,
What do you
right.
think they're
I
gonna
mean,
say? They're gonna say no. They didn't enjoy being charged more. Like they
nobody
felt
wants to be
nickled and
charged
dimed.
more.
Well,
Right.
of course they felt nickled and dimed. You know why? Because they were nickled and dimed. Like
Yeah.
they paid more money. Like obviously, but to me, the important question is, did that make them change their behavior? Did they say, well, now I'm not going to go back there again? Did they,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
not just did they say that, did they do it? The next week when they really, really wanted their favorite pizza, but the last time they were there, the person had a 3% fee when they used their card. What they really did, based on all the data I've seen of like merchant portfolios that are doing these programs, guess what they did? They went back and got their favorite pizza and they paid the 3% fee.
Right. Right.
Did they enjoy that
Yeah.
they had to pay 3%? No. Did they enjoy biting into their favorite pizza? Yes. So they
Yes.
went back and they did it anyway. So I think all these stats, like it's easy to kind of interpret them in a certain light, but it's like, it's very
Oh yeah.
difficult to get the real data on this particular problem, in my opinion.
You can make stats say whatever you want them to
Exactly.
say. You know,
Right. And it's like,
and
how do
that's
they phrase the question?
right.
Yeah.
How you parse the numbers exactly.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's definitely worth
Oh,
keeping in
absolutely.
mind. You know,
Absolutely. Well, and again, I think to
and
me,
again,
big,
like you.
big, big picture is consumer sentiment, right? Consumers are becoming more aware of paying more for their using their card,
Right.
and they don't like it.
Right.
That's what we know. Now, again, what does that mean? Are they going to change behavior? Is it certain types of charging more? Are there ways to make it more palatable? We don't have answers to those questions yet, but we do know consumers are becoming more and more aware that they're paying more when they use a card, and as a general rule, they don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
But there's a lot of things I don't like, but I do it anyway.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so finally, I wanted to talk. I haven't done this, and I haven't done this in a while. Fiserv publishes a monthly business index, a small business index, excuse me. And its August report, which was just published like the other day, showed month over month that sales were relatively unchanged with some bright spots. For example, at quick service restaurants, sales surged, registering 8.3% year over year growth. As consumers were looking for more wallet friendly dining options, right?
Mhm.
Sales in the retail sector were up 1.1%. Wholesale trade delivered fewer transactions but bigger tickets.
Of
On a
course.
month over month basis, wholesale sales slipped while average tickets were up. Average tickets were up 2.3%.
Interesting.
And year over year sales growth was 3.1%, driven by rising ticket size, 5.8% increase, which was seen as a possible sign of tariff related pressure.
Interesting.
Yeah. And Pfizer reported that discretionary spending rose 1.2% month over month, led by QSR and budget friendly entertainment.
Hmm.
So, it's a mixed bag, but it certainly shows that, despite the, shall we say, fluctuating economic outlooks, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
there people are still spending.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good sign for our industry for sure. We
for
make money
sure.
on when people spend money. So it's a good sign for
That's
us.
exactly it. Yeah.
And again, it's, despite any other trends, the percentage of, kind of the wallet share for digital payments is going up
Right. Right.
consistently, continues to go up. That doesn't mean cash is going anywhere, but the
No.
percentage of digital payments continues to go up. And again, that's good for our industry. So
Yeah, sure is. So
good
that's it
stuff.
for this week.
Awesome. Well, Patty, thank you so much. Always appreciate your insights, and we appreciate all the work you do for us.
Thank you.